my primary focus is on threats to US elections that come from overseas and how this foreign interference impacts our election security, our domestic media, our social media, our political climate overall, and of course, our campaigns. Our foreign adversaries who undertake this activity, they want us to be divided. They want us to be susceptible to inflammatory information online. And they really want our system to be in chaos. So while we can't see many of these attacks, they're happening all the time and they're having an impact. And to address the previous question very briefly, oftentimes other countries try out these tactics overseas before they use them here against us. So that's why we study these elections, to see what tactics Russia, for example, is using in other countries. We witnessed several types of attacks on our democracy directed from overseas, and Cliff Newman talked about a number of these earlier. First, the hacking and public release of campaign documents by a hostile foreign entity with the goal of influencing an election in favor of a preferred candidate. Again, think WikiLeaks, think the Clinton campaign emails. Hold on, there we go. Second, public disinformation and misinformation campaigns waged largely on social media designed to create division in our country. Foreign actors create fake accounts that appear to be real American voters, but which are actually trolls or bots. And then those fake accounts promote propaganda, they promote conspiracy theories, and even outright lies, which are then often shared by real people, by real voters, thinking they're true. This is where hostile foreign governments try to rile up Americans against one another and make us distrust our own elections outcomes by promoting false conspiracy theories about things like, for example, voter fraud. Third, we've seen the scanning and probing of voter registration rolls and other voter data by Russia. And there's no public evidence that this data was ever altered, but it's definitely an area that folks are keeping a close eye on, given, of course, the threat that exists. Russia isn't the only country undertaking this kind of activity, but they're definitely the most prolific and most aggressive that we've seen. China and Iran are also, for example, active in this space. So turning to the slides now, we're currently watching the upcoming elections in Germany. They're happening just a few days from now on September 26th. And we're looking at them as a case study for what Russia might try to do here. We already know that they're looking at our midterm elections next year. So we're looking at this case study for help here. And there are a number of key issues at stake for Russia in the upcoming German elections. And a growing body of evidence indicates that Russia is already meddling by using its media networks to spread propaganda and false information, and also by stealing information through cyber attacks like phishing against prominent politicians with the goal of embarrassing them ahead of the elections. You see on the slide Russian President Vladimir Putin and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who is not actually on the ballot, but I think in happier times probably in this slide. This Russian propaganda machine is thriving in Germany today. Kremlin-backed media outlet RT Deutsch, you see on the left hand of the screen, their website, is leading this effort, in part by promoting positive stories about the far-right German party, which it sees as more favorable to Moscow's point of view, and also sees as a disruptor in the German political system. Again, Russia likes chaos, likes to promote chaos. According to one think tank, in 2021, RT Deutsch has been the third most retweeted media account in Germany out of all traditional and foreign media. RT also has a real presence in the United States, by the way, as you can see on the right side of the slide through RT America. So we certainly are not immune to this threat or this tactic. Watch out and look for things. If you see people sharing stories, for example, from RT America on Facebook or Twitter. Germany recently called Russia out. They blamed Moscow for a spate of phishing attacks on prominent politicians. These attacks have been intensifying as we get closer and closer to election day in Germany. German intelligence has assessed that these attacks could be a prelude to a public leak campaign designed to influence the elections. So again, with election day only a few days away, we are certainly watching to see if any of this information that may have been stolen leaks out. Finally, there is, of course, always the ever-present threat of ransomware attacks. Adam mentioned one on the agriculture sector at the beginning of today's presentation. The threat of ransomware attacks by criminal outfits tied to foreign governments, hostile foreign governments, against our election infrastructure. In general, again, as Adam mentioned, foreign ransomware attacks have been on the rise, and there's no reason to think that our elections infrastructure wouldn't be a target or would be immune to this. This slide, this infrastructure, of course, has been designated as critical by the US government that allows DHS, Homeland Security, to provide prioritized cybersecurity services at the request of state and local elections officials. Jurisdictions should definitely take advantage of that offer. You'll see on the slide each player in the elections business, which represents a potential vulnerability to this kind of ransomware or other kind of cyber attack. This next slide shows examples of all the elections assets that could be subject to online threats from overseas before, on, and after election day. All of these need to be secured. And it's critical to understand that threats from overseas don't stop on election day. We've seen many examples of foreign attacks continuing in the days after an election, trying to sow chaos in that time period, particularly if it's a close election. So that's something certainly to watch out for. So what can we do? First, of course, use good operational security. We heard earlier from Cliff Newman all about how to do this. Don't just have one single point of failure. Second, we need to train ourselves, campaigns, political parties, and elections officials how to detect foreign-based disinformation, including how to spot bots by doing things like looking for hyperactivity, more than 50 to 60 tweets a day, or unlikely popularity for a very recently started account. You can also look for odd English syntax that indicates maybe the person isn't a native English speaker. Here's an example of one kind of bot up on this slide. In August 2017, an account called @KirstenKellogg posted a tweet attacking US media outlet ProPublica. This account had very low activity, only 76 followers, and wasn't following any other accounts. But its post was retweeted and liked over 23,000 times. So chances are that's not real, and it's likely coming from overseas somewhere. None of us should want to share that kind of information. These are the kinds of things to look out for. Tech companies also have to do more to combat proliferation of disinformation, especially coming from overseas. Social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and the individuals running them have civic responsibilities as they grapple with disinformation that flourishes on their platform. Again, much of this is originating from overseas. They have ways on their end to see where things are potentially coming from, to see the language that things are initially being done in. A huge part of fighting this disinformation is also about increasing media literacy, so people just don't automatically believe what they read online. This is, of course, a much bigger societal problem beyond just the impact it has on our democracy, as Professor McNeely just talked a little bit about. But it's really spreading faster than the fact checkers or the tech companies can keep up with it. And crucially, to underscore, people have to want to know when they're being fed disinformation online. That's not always the case. We saw some really disturbing anecdotes after 2016 that people didn't seem to care that they'd attended rallies organized by Russian bots on Facebook. I would probably be upset if I attended a rally that the Russians had organized. But finally, this is also crucial. We and our allies have to use whatever tools we have to pressure countries like Russia if they continue to meddle in foreign political systems. You'll see on this slide, I think, a really instructive quote that one expert wrote just this week in the New York Times. He said, purely defensive strategies will also fall short. Cybersecurity expertise is expensive, it's in high demand in the United States, and it's unrealistic to think that every single American hospital, school, fire department, and small business can defend itself against, what are pretty highly sophisticated criminals. The task is just too big. Instead, a comprehensive anti-ransomware strategy must make it more difficult for criminal groups and these nation states, these hostile foreign governments that may sponsor them, to carry out attacks. And that's the purview of the federal government. An aggressive campaign would target the foundation of ransomware criminals' operations, their personnel, their infrastructure, and their money. And the US is capable of doing this. We've used these same tools to go after drug traffickers or terrorist organizations. We can certainly do it in this realm as well.